They say a wedding changes your life. Mine destroyed it in under 2 minutes. One moment I was standing at the altar, smiling through the lace veil, heart pounding like a drum, imagining the honeymoon, the new apartment, the name Mrs. Carter etched into wedding invites for decades to come. The next, Julian leaned in, not to kiss me, but to whisper, "I'm sorry, Clara, this isn't going to happen. Here's a check, $1 million. Please don't make a scene." My breath caught. My lips parted. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. He slid the envelope into my trembling hands, turned and walked away, past our stunned families, past the pastor, past the flower girl who froze mid-step. The silence in the room was louder than a scream, gasps, murmurs, a camera flash, my mother's sharp sob, my maid of honor running toward me. But I couldn't hear any of it. All I saw was red velvet carpet, white roses, and my future bleeding out like a gunshot wound. I didn't cry. I ran. I tore off the veil, dropped the bouquet, and bolted through the chapel doors into the blinding California sun. Heels clicking, lungs burning. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away from those eyes, pitying, judging, recording. I ended up behind the venue where delivery trucks hummed and staff smoked cigarettes near the dumpsters. That's where I saw him, leaning against the concrete wall like a shadow with arms crossed, a security guard, tall, calm, dark uniform. Name tag, E. Blake. He looked at me, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with the kind of steady silence that felt like shelter. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I laughed. Or maybe it was a scream. I just got dumped at the altar and bribed with $1 million to vanish. So, define okay. He said nothing, just nodded once. I stared at him, at the sharp jaw, the unreadable eyes, the way he didn't flinch at my madness. And then the words left my mouth before I could stop them. "Marry me." He raised an eyebrow. "You're not serious." "I am. Completely. I have a dress, a venue, an audience of rich assholes waiting for a show, and I refuse to let them see me broken." A pause. A long one. Then he said, "You don't even know my name." I stepped forward. "Then tell me on the way to the altar." 5 minutes later, I walked back down that same aisle with a man I'd never met, gripping my hand like it was a lifeline. The whispers returned. A different kind this time. But I held my head high, because at least I was choosing this chaos. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the man beside me wasn't a security guard. He was Ethan Blake, the only son of Victoria Blake, CEO of Blake International Holdings, the same empire I'd mocked, resented, and spent years trying to avoid. And I had just married its future king. I wasn't always this dramatic. Before the disaster, before the tabloids, before I became that woman who married a stranger, I was just Clara. I lived in a sunlit apartment on the east side of Los Angeles, the kind with cracked walls, secondhand furniture, and a view of someone else's laundry line. I drank oat milk lattes, rescued a grumpy black cat named Hugo, and ran a modest interior design studio called Bear House. We specialized in minimalist spaces for stressed-out millennials who wanted their lives to look better than they felt. I was independent. I was content. Until Julian Carter walked into my life and turned it upside down. He came to one of my consults on behalf of his parents, who wanted their beach house remodeled. He didn't care about color palettes. He cared about me. And when a man like Julian, polished, powerful, painfully charming, looks at a woman like she's the only person in the room, it's easy to forget your boundaries. We started dating. Then suddenly, I was being flown to Aspen on weekends, gifted Cartier bracelets I couldn't afford to look at, introduced as the one to boardroom sharks and brunch queens. And the crazy thing was, I believed it. For 2 years, I was Clara Bennett, girlfriend of the Golden Boy. He made me feel chosen, special. I thought we were building a future. But beneath the fancy dates and silk sheets, I started to notice cracks. His mother never called me by name, always the decorator like I was hired help. Julian changed around his family, more performative, less affectionate. He hated when I brought up my business or bills. He'd say, "Just let me take care of it." I didn't want to be taken care of. I wanted to be respected. But love makes you bend, sometimes too far. Then came the wedding, and the check. You know the rest. What you don't know is what happened after I married the stranger. His name was Ethan Blake. He didn't talk much that first night. After we escaped the venue, we ended up at a rundown diner with sticky menus and burnt coffee, two ghosts trying to pretend this wasn't insane. "I'm Ethan," he said across the red vinyl booth. "Clara," I replied, though I was pretty sure my name was trending on Twitter by then. We sat in silence for a while, surrounded by clinking plates and the hum of fluorescent lights. I asked nothing. He offered nothing. It should have felt awkward. It didn't. It felt still. Eventually, I told him I ran a design studio, that I once tried to dye my hair pink and ended up looking like bubblegum, that I hated weddings with Ed Sheeran songs. He smirked at that. He told me he worked in logistics, whatever that meant. I didn't push, not that night, because something in his quiet presence made me feel safe, like he wasn't trying to fix me or judge me or mold me into someone else. He was just there. The next morning, he walked me home. No questions, no expectations, no goodbye. He didn't leave a number. I thought that would be the end of it. But then came the job offer. A client I'd been chasing for a year suddenly reached out, wanted to renovate a $10 million Bel Air property, no pitch needed. My studio exploded with calls, partnerships, invites, things I never could have landed without connections. Powerful connections. At first, I thought it was luck. Then I saw him again, not in uniform, in a suit, standing next to a woman in a power dress on the cover of Forbes magazine, Victoria Blake and Son, the quiet empire behind Blake International. My fake husband wasn't a security guard. He was Ethan Blake, the heir to one of the most ruthless corporate dynasties on the West Coast. And I had just married into a family I swore I'd never trust. The morning I found out the truth, the world didn't end with a bang. It began with a whisper. I was at my studio reorganizing samples for a beachfront property remodel when my assistant Lily burst in, breathless, waving a magazine like it was a subpoena. "You didn't tell me your husband was Ethan Blake," she said. My heart stopped. I looked up from the tile swatches, unsure if I'd heard her right. "My what?" She dropped the magazine on the table between us. There he was, Ethan Blake in a perfectly tailored navy suit, standing beside a steel-eyed older woman with a headline that screamed, "Victoria Blake and her legacy, the empire of influence." I stared at the photo for a full minute before I could breathe again. I had married that Ethan Blake, not the quiet man in a security uniform who had offered me his jacket at midnight, not the guy who drank diner coffee and let me cry without asking for details, but the heir to Blake International, a man worth billions, a man whose family owned private islands and senators. And he had lied to me. No, not lied. He had withheld the truth. I told myself there was a difference. There had to be. I tried to focus on work, but every sound felt amplified. The buzzing of the AC, the hum of traffic, the silence from my phone. I didn't call him. I didn't text. But that night, when I walked into my apartment, he was there, leaning against the kitchen counter like he'd been waiting for Judgment Day. "You found out," he said quietly. "You think?" I held up the magazine. "Did you plan for me to find out this way?" "No," he said, "but I knew it would come eventually. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, 'Why didn't you tell me who you were?'" He looked tired, not guilty, just worn. "Because the moment I told you, you'd look at me the way everyone else does, like I was a means to an end, or worse, an enemy." I swallowed the bitter laugh rising in my throat. "So you thought lying was better?" "I never lied to you, Clara." Not telling me you're one of the richest men in California is a pretty big omission." He didn't argue. "I didn't want you to know me as that. I wanted you to know me as a man, not a legacy." His words should have moved me. But all I could think about was Julian, how he had decided what I deserved, what I should accept, how he handed me a check like I was a problem to be solved. And now Ethan had made the same decision, just dressed it in softer words. "I need space," I said. Ethan didn't try to stop me. He just nodded once, picked up his coat, and left. The next few days were a blur. Work kept pouring in like a dam had broken. Collaborations, interviews, feature requests. And through it all, a pattern emerged. Someone was pulling strings for me. I traced a new supplier for imported marble. Turns out they were a subsidiary of Blake Holdings, the gallery that featured my work, funded by a foundation Ethan's mother chaired. It wasn't coincidence. It was control. Even when he wasn't there, he was orchestrating everything around me. The final straw came when I overheard 2 clients at a launch party. "Do you think she actually earned this? Or did Blake just buy her credibility?" That night, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just packed a small suitcase, left a note for Lily, and disappeared for a week. I needed to remember who I was before all this, before Julian, before Ethan, before love turned into transaction. And when I came back, he was waiting again, not in a suit, not with apologies, just Ethan, holding a photo. It was from the diner. Me, half laughing, syrup on my chin. Him, blurry in the background, caught mid-smile. He said, "That's the moment I knew. I didn't want to be Blake. I just wanted to be with you." I didn't answer. Not yet, because love wasn't enough. Not after this. I didn't go far. A small cabin 2 hours north of Los Angeles, tucked between redwoods and fog. No Wi-Fi, no reception, no mirrors that showed me my reflection too clearly. I needed silence. Not peace, just silence. There's a difference. The first few days were the hardest. I'd wake up gasping, unsure of where I was, half expecting Julian to be beside me or Ethan at the door. But there was only the rustling of leaves and the slow, unbothered breath of nature. I didn't cook. I didn't draw. I didn't write a single email. I slept. I cried. And I watched the same stupid VHS tape of Pride and Prejudice that the last guest had left behind. Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen dancing in circles while my own world had fallen out of rhythm. One afternoon I tried to sketch. My hand shook. The lines looked wrong. I couldn't even remember what I liked to design anymore. Was it clean lines? Warm woods? Had I ever actually had a style? Or had I just been parroting whatever wealthy clients wanted? The question echoed louder than the wind outside. By the 5th day, I took a walk deeper into the forest. I stumbled on an old shed, half collapsed, covered in moss. Inside, there were rusted tools, abandoned jars, a broken chair. I sat there for hours, crying, then breathing, then just sitting. It felt like the world had stopped demanding anything from me. And in that stillness, something opened. It started small. I found a charcoal pencil in my bag, just one. I started drawing the shed, then the trees, then the chair. Not for work, not for anyone, just because my fingers needed to move. The next morning, I woke up early, swept the cabin floor, lit a candle. Made real coffee, not that watered-down nonsense Julian liked. I opened my laptop and made a new folder, Bennett Studio Real Work. I deleted the pitch deck I'd made for Blake Holdings. I deleted the proposal for that influencer's penthouse. I deleted a dozen designs I'd made just to please other people. And then I started again. Not everything made sense, but I stopped caring about sense. I cared about truth. By the time the 7th day came, I still didn't want to return. But I knew I had to, because running away had served its purpose. Now it was time to walk, carefully, quietly, toward myself again. Back in LA, things hadn't paused. My studio was flooded with calls, my inbox overflowing. But I told Lily to cancel everything for 2 weeks. No excuses. I needed to rebuild. This time, on my terms. I rehired a former intern who had lost her job during COVID. I partnered with a small architecture firm run by a disabled veteran. I refused any project tied to Blake Holdings. Word got around fast. Some clients vanished. Others showed up with more respect than ever. And slowly, I started to feel like me again. Not Mrs. Blake. Not the ex-fiancé with the $1 million scandal. Just Clara. One evening, I returned home to find a package at my door. No name, just my initials, handwritten in gold ink. Inside, a single photo. The shed I had drawn, framed. And behind it, a note. Sometimes we need to fall apart to remember what we're made of. E. No pressure. No apology. Just acknowledgement. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive Ethan, but I knew this. He had seen something in me, something I had forgotten, and now I was starting to see it too. People think revenge is fire and fury, but for me, it began with silence and a spreadsheet. I knew I couldn't undo the lies or erase the whispers that followed my name, but I could reclaim what they had turned into a spectacle. This time, no one would pull strings behind the curtain. No husband, no ex, no billionaire mother-in-law-to-be. I was going to rewrite the narrative, my way. I started by calling a woman named Cassandra Hill, a former corporate strategist who had walked away from Wall Street after a burnout and founded her own consultancy. She'd been featured in a podcast I listened to during my week in the cabin. Her tagline had stayed with me. I help women who've been reduced to headlines build empires louder than the gossip. I didn't have to say much. Once she heard my voice, she said, "I've been waiting for your call." We met in a nondescript cafe in Venice Beach. No PR reps, no assistants, just two women with open laptops, bitter coffee, and sharper minds than the world expected us to have. "I don't want to be saved," I told her. "I want to build something they can't look away from." Cassandra smiled. "Good, because pity is boring." We got to work. Cassandra showed me exactly how deep Ethan's influence had been. There were press releases quietly planted about our romantic elopement, articles praising my work that had been sponsored by foundations tied to the Blake name, even a few awards I'd been nominated for thanks to backdoor donations. It made my skin crawl, but I didn't burn it all down. I documented, archived, built a timeline. If I ever needed to defend myself, I'd have evidence that I had never asked for any of it. I restructured Bennett's studio as a public benefit corporation. We would prioritize affordable design for marginalized communities, housing for single mothers, spaces for kids with learning disabilities, adaptive renovations for wounded veterans. Every dollar would have purpose. Every project would speak louder than gossip. I launched a new initiative, the Shelter Series, a rotating program where designers and architects volunteered their time for pro bono redesigns in underserved neighborhoods. I announced the first project on a live stream. No PR firm, no sponsor. Just me, standing in front of a crumbling community center in East LA, sleeves rolled up and voice steady. "We're not here to impress billionaires," I said. "We're here to build dignity." The video went viral in less than 24 hours, not because it was polished, but because it was true. But I wasn't done. The final piece of the puzzle was the Blake family, specifically Victoria Blake, the woman who had tried to erase me with silence and money. I requested a meeting. She declined. So I did what any self-respecting woman would do. I crashed her charity gala. I wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no designer label, just confidence and a speech. I waited until the Women in Leadership Award presentation. Then I walked on stage without permission, took the mic from the startled host and faced the crowd. "I'm Clara Bennett," I said. "Some of you know me as a scandal. Others know me as a mistake. But tonight, you'll know me as a woman who survived being bought, silenced, and nearly erased." Gasps. Camera flashes. A few security guards stepped forward, but Victoria raised a hand to stop them. I continued. I didn't marry into this world. I crashed into it, and I got back up. So no, I don't need your charity, but I'd like to offer you mine. I announced the shelter series publicly, called on the audience to stop building legacies with exclusion. Then I walked off stage before they could throw me out. Back home, I found a note at my door, from Ethan. Sometimes silence is strength, but tonight your voice was everything. I didn't cry, but I did smile. After the gala, everything shifted. Some said I was unhinged, others called me brave. But no one was ignoring me anymore. For the first time, the narrative was mine. I began receiving hundreds of emails, women from around the country. Some were architects, designers, business owners. Others were stay-at-home moms, college students, survivors. They wrote to say thank you, to tell me that they, too, had been reduced to the woman he left, or the woman he paid off, or the woman who got too far. I read every single message, and then I replied to one in particular, from a high school art teacher in Ohio. She had 3 daughters and wanted to convert her garage into a tiny studio where her students could come after school. She didn't have money. She didn't even ask for help. She just wanted to tell me she still believed in creation. I flew to Ohio the next week. We renovated the garage in 4 days, painted every wall by hand, built custom shelves, installed a skylight. And I told her, this is what I want to spend my life doing. Back in LA, word got around that Clara Bennett wasn't just surviving, she was building. One evening, I was invited to speak at a university panel on design ethics. I almost declined, but then I remembered what it felt like to sit in that cabin, unsure of who I was, and I thought, maybe there's someone out there in the same place right now. I said yes. The auditorium was packed. Among the audience, I saw someone I didn't expect, Lisa, Julian's sister. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. She came up to me after the panel. Julian's in rehab, she said. He asked me to tell you he's sorry, that he still thinks about the look on your face that day. I didn't know what to say, but I knew this much. I didn't hate him anymore. I just felt free. A few days later, I got a call. From her, Victoria Blake. She asked for a meeting. I agreed, but on my terms. We met in a quiet garden behind an art museum. No lawyers, no handlers, just 2 women who had once tried to erase each other. She looked smaller without her armor of luxury, but her voice was the same. I misjudged you, she said. I thought you were temporary, that you would fade. I didn't answer. I was wrong, she continued. You are permanent. She handed me a check, a donation for the shelter series. I didn't tear it up. I didn't thank her. I just said, make it monthly. She smiled. You've learned how to play the game. I shook my head. No, I'm rewriting the rules. As I walked away, I didn't look back. That was the last time I saw Victoria Blake in person. But a month later, a press release landed in my inbox. Blake International to partner with Bennett Studio on a new social housing project in South LA. I hadn't signed anything. I called Ethan. Did you do this? I asked. No, he said. My mother did. I think you won. I didn't want to win, I replied. I wanted to matter. There was a pause. You always did, he said softly, even before I knew your name. That night, I stood in my studio, lights dimmed, looking out over the city. It didn't sparkle like they show in movies, but it pulsed, with movement, with life, with things still unfinished. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this. I had survived betrayal, shame, manipulation, and legacy, and still, I stood. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's mistake, but as myself, Clara Bennett. Some people think power is loud. Victoria Blake believed in that kind of power, the kind that walked into rooms before she did, the kind that made people stand up straighter, speak softer, apologize for things they hadn't done. She didn't just move through the world, she rearranged it. And for a while, I thought she had won. After the Shelter series exploded in popularity, Bennett's studio was everywhere. TV spots, podcast interviews, panels, TED Talk requests, even a book deal offer. But I had one rule: no press that mentioned him, no deals that tied me back to the Blakes. Still, I knew she was watching. I could feel it like static under my skin. Victoria's attention, quiet but deliberate. And one day it arrived in the form of an invitation, not to a charity event, not to a dinner party, but to a private meeting, off the books. The location? Blake Tower, penthouse, 68th floor, the heart of her empire. I told Cassandra. She narrowed her eyes. "You sure?" "No," I said, "but I have to walk through the front door." "You mean, instead of being dragged?" "Exactly." I wore black again, like the gala. No makeup, no entourage, just me. The elevator ride was long, not just because of the height, but the weight of it all. History, betrayal, silence, shame. The doors opened to a room made of glass, light, and too many orchids. And there she was, Victoria Blake, dressed in gray, not armor, not elegance, just control. She didn't rise to greet me. "You've built quite a brand," she said. "I've built a life," I replied. Her smile was thin, and yet, somehow, it still overlaps with mine. I sat across from her. "No, Victoria, yours overlaps with mine." She paused. "You think this is a war?" "No," I said. "I think it was a war. You just lost." Her eyes didn't flinch. "You're clever." "I'm free." "Are you?" she asked, tilting her head. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're still dancing in my shadow. You're just better at pretending it's sunlight." It stung, because part of it was true. She leaned forward. "Let me be clear. I don't need to destroy you. Time will do that. The public forgets. Empires fade. Trends vanish. But Blake Holdings is not a trend, and I don't fade." I held her gaze. "Then maybe it's time someone showed you what light feels like when it's not artificial." She blinked. "You asked me here. What do you want?" I said. She reached into her bag, pulled out a folder. Inside, a proposal, a merger, a new foundation, the Blake Bennett Legacy Fund. Her voice was calm. "You have the public. I have the capital. Let's give them what they want." I read it. The terms were clean, favorable even. But I saw what it was: an attempt to reabsorb me, to rewrite history, to pretend this had all been part of her vision. I closed the folder. "I'm not for sale." Her smile dropped. "It's not a purchase. It's a legacy." I stood. "No, Victoria. Legacy is what happens after you're gone, and I'm just getting started." I didn't slam the door when I left. That would have given her too much satisfaction. Instead, I walked out slowly, heels silent on the marble, her offer still on the table, untouched. Let her sit in it. Let her wonder how someone like me dared. 2 weeks passed. She didn't respond publicly. Of course not. Victoria Blake didn't respond. She maneuvered, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Then one morning, the bomb dropped. A leak. An anonymous article claimed that the Shelter series had been secretly funded by Blake Holdings to boost their image after a failed IPO bid, that Clara Bennett was a figurehead, that she had never truly built anything on her own. The article was detailed, precise, intentional. Victoria's fingerprints were all over it. I sat in my office, fists clenched. Cassandra called. "We're handling it. Legal's drafting a statement." "No," I said. "No? We're not denying. You want to confirm her lies?" I shook my head. "I want to tell the truth." That evening, I went live. No makeup, no script, just my voice. Tonight, I want to talk about something bigger than slander. I want to talk about the way powerful people try to rewrite women's stories. I told them everything. About the wedding, the money, the shame, the silence, about the Shelter series, the real donors, the sacrifices. I didn't name Victoria. I didn't need to. Because truth, when spoken plainly, has a way of pointing its own finger. By midnight, the video had 2.6 million views. By morning, it was headline news. But that wasn't the victory. The victory came 3 days later, when Victoria Blake resigned as chairwoman of Blake Holdings, citing personal reflection and the need to step aside for new leadership. That same week, I received a letter. No envelope, just cream-colored paper, handwritten. Your silence used to unsettle me. Now your voice does. Congratulations. I never replied. A month passed. Then one afternoon I got a call I didn't expect. Ethan. I hesitated before answering. Clara, he said softly, I heard. About everything. My heart beat faster, but not in the way it used to. I saw the video. You were incredible. I said nothing. I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry for everything. Especially for letting her get between us. I closed my eyes. Thank you, I said. He paused. Is it too late? Yes, I said gently, but that doesn't mean I hate you. He exhaled. That's more than I deserve. We didn't say goodbye. We just hung up, quietly, finally. Weeks later, I stood on the rooftop of the new Shelter Series headquarters. The sun was setting. The city below glowed amber and gold. A little girl ran past me, her mother calling after her, laughing. 2 teenage boys painted a mural along the east wall. My team set up folding chairs for a community event. This was mine. Not stolen, not gifted, built. I turned to Cassandra. You think it's over? I asked. She grinned. No, but I think she knows not to mess with you again. I smiled, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It never really was. It was about taking back myself. You don't always see the moment an empire begins to fall. Sometimes it's loud, like a scandal or a leaked email or a resignation speech gone viral. Other times it's quiet, a name disappearing from a boardroom, a portrait removed from a company wall, a hallway that echoes too much because no one walks down it anymore. Victoria Blake's fall was both. After her resignation, the headlines softened. Some tried to frame it as a graceful exit, a woman of legacy passing the torch. But the whispers told a different story. Her influence shrank overnight. Partnerships dissolved, investors backed out. A few old allies turned their backs altogether. Rumors swirled about secret payouts, threatened lawsuits, even a blacklist she tried to enforce against anyone who worked with me. But none of it stuck, because the public no longer feared her. They were done being impressed. I heard from Lisa, Ethan's sister, that Victoria retreated to a private estate in Maine. No staff, no press, no more silk gowns and gala speeches, just solitude. Some said she took up painting. Others said she burned every canvas she made. I didn't care. I didn't want her destroyed. I just wanted her to feel what it was like to be powerless in a world she couldn't bend anymore. As for Ethan, he tried for a while to rebuild his reputation. New ventures, strategic interviews, a low-profile investment firm focused on sustainable growth and female-led startups. Cute, really. A few media outlets gave him credit for evolving. But evolution is earned, not branded. And behind the polished photo shoots and clean image, something in his eyes had dimmed. Lisa told me he kept the invitation from our wedding, never opened it, just kept it in his desk. One night during a family dinner, he got up and left halfway through dessert, drove 5 hours to the coast, sat on the beach until sunrise. Didn't say a word to anyone. They found the card in his pocket, stained with salt, still sealed. He called me twice more after our last conversation. I didn't answer. He didn't leave voicemails. I think he knew silence was my answer. I wasn't trying to punish them. This wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Months passed. Life didn't pause for Victoria or Ethan, and it definitely didn't pause for me. I kept building. The Shelter series expanded into new cities. We launched youth programs, housing initiatives, a podcast that climbed the top charts within weeks. People began to refer to me not just as a survivor, but as a leader, a woman who built something real, something lasting. Then one afternoon, Lisa showed up at my office unannounced. She looked exhausted, but relieved. I just wanted to say, "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not becoming her." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Lisa reached into her bag and handed me a small box. Inside was a photograph. It was me and Ethan, taken years ago. One of those photo booth strips, us laughing, making silly faces. His arm around my shoulder, my head tilted toward his. "I found it in his apartment," she said. "I think he meant to throw it away, but he couldn't." I looked at it, not with pain, not even with longing, just clarity. "That girl," I whispered, touching the image, "really thought it was forever." Lisa smiled gently. She didn't know she'd become someone stronger. That night, I went home early. I lit a candle, played a Nina Simone record, poured a glass of wine. Then I walked out to the porch and sat with the photo. I didn't cry. I didn't tear it up. I just placed it in a small wooden box, next to old letters, childhood sketches, the first script I ever wrote, pieces of me I'd outgrown but never denied. Some scars don't fade, they just stop bleeding. Victoria Blake didn't crash in flames. She faded, like an old empire left out in the weather too long. And Ethan? He kept trying to be good, to be known for something other than who his mother was, or who he failed to love. And maybe he'll get there someday, but he'll have to do it without me. Because the biggest consequence they faced wasn't public shame. It wasn't the loss of status or control or legacy. It was this. They lost access. To me. To my story. To the person I became. And no amount of money or regret can buy that back. It's strange. The moment you realize you're no longer angry, not numb, not indifferent, just free. The chains aren't broken because someone unlocked them. They're gone because you stopped carrying them. I still get asked about Ethan, sometimes gently, sometimes with that tone, the one that suggests we had a love story instead of a lesson. And sometimes people still bring up Victoria Blake, as if she were some dark queen from a forgotten fable. I never correct them. Let people tell whatever version helps them sleep. I sleep just fine. My mornings now start with sunlight through linen curtains. No more penthouses, no city skyline, just a house on the edge of a lake, wooden steps, coffee that takes time, a mailbox that squeaks when it opens. I spend most days writing. Not scripts anymore, not for other people. Just stories. For me. For the girl I used to be. For the women who message me every week saying, "I didn't think I could survive until I heard yours." That means more than any award ever did. Cassandra comes by once a week with too much wine and too many opinions. She still runs the Shelter series, better than I ever did. "I'm a better boss because I learned from you," she said once. "From my mistakes. From your spine," she said, "and your silence. You taught me when to speak and when not to." One evening I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just soft cream paper. Elegant handwriting. But it wasn't from Victoria. It was from a young woman named Marissa. She had been in one of our first workshops. Her letter said, "I used to think women like me didn't get to write our own endings. Then I saw you do it." She enclosed a photo, her standing in front of a new shelter she helped open in Portland. The sign read, "The Clara House." I cried. Not the way I used to. Not broken sobs or gasps for breath. Just a quiet, steady stream of knowing. I kept the letter, taped it to my mirror, so that every morning I remember. I didn't just survive. I became someone worth surviving for. The seasons shifted slowly here. Spring came with the scent of pine and soft rain. Summer with dragonflies and wild strawberries. Now it was autumn, my favorite. Leaves fell like golden confetti, as if nature were celebrating something. Maybe it was. I took long walks through the woods behind my house. No headphones, no phone. Just the crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the breeze whispering things I used to be too busy to hear. One morning, I found a bench someone had carved from driftwood and left by the edge of the lake. I sat, and for the first time in years, I didn't think about what came next. There was no next. There was just this. A man walking his dog passed by. He smiled. I smiled back. He didn't know me as the ex-fiancé of Ethan Blake or the woman who stood up to Victoria. He didn't know about weddings that didn't happen, about million-dollar bribes, about love that turned to ash and still tried to light itself again. He just saw a woman in a coat sipping coffee, watching ducks. And I loved that. Because that's the real revenge, isn't it? Not the fall of those who hurt you, but the quiet life they no longer get to interrupt. I used to think I needed closure, that if I could just have one last conversation, one last explanation, it would fix something inside me. But healing didn't come in a courtroom, or a press conference, or even in that perfectly timed monologue the old me would have written. It came here. In the stillness, in the choosing to move forward without dragging the past behind me like a dead limb. People ask what I would say to Ethan if I saw him again. I think I'd say, thank you. Not sarcastically, not with venom, just thank you. For showing me the edges of myself, for making me walk through fire so I'd learn I don't burn easy, for stepping aside, even if you didn't mean to, so I could see what I was truly made of. Victoria? I hope she paints. I hope she finally sees something she can't control and learns to love it anyway. I don't wish her pain, but I don't owe her peace. Me? I'm still learning, still writing, still laughing harder than I thought possible, still waking up every morning surprised by how light my chest feels, still becoming, because the point was never to win. The point was to stop playing games I never agreed to reclaim my time, my name, my narrative, to look in the mirror and say, she is mine, and mean it. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you're standing in the middle of your own wreckage, wondering how love could turn into something so hollow, how a family could become strangers, how someone could look you in the eye and lie without flinching. Maybe you've been told to move on, as if healing is a button you push, or worse, that it was your fault for trusting too much. I've been there, and I'm here to tell you, you are not weak for breaking. You are not foolish for believing, and you are not defined by the ones who failed you. The world will try to tell your story for you. They will label you victim, dramatic, overreacting, bitter. Let them talk. Then write your own story, not out of revenge, not to prove anything, but because you deserve a life that belongs to you. You deserve mornings without dread, love without performance, silence without fear. You don't need a perfect ending, just an honest one. And if you're still breathing, you're still writing it. So write bravely. Write like someone who knows the difference between surviving and becoming. Because I promise you, there's a version of you waiting on the other side of this pain, and she's worth everything it takes to get there.